In the last few years, I haven't been running spring marathons, and that has left me a whole season to do other things. Sometimes I get sucked into doing a trail race because, well, everybody else is doing it and I have a fear of missing out. Other times I register for some local 10K races, but last year, since I had done some indoor track, I thought I would do a 5K instead as my first outdoor race. So it was only a 19-minute run, but I remember thinking how I'd forgotten how hard those 19 minutes can feel, and I was left wondering if I got the pacing right. Well, today's book explains that in order to run a fast 5K, you should schedule some tune-up races because the experience will show your central governor that you're not putting your life in danger, and that will unlock a whole new level of performance despite your fitness not really changing. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you would like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running, or maybe inspire you to try something new. My name is Liz, and with my co-host Alan, we're going to talk with author Pete Magill about his book, Fast 5K, 25 Crucial Keys and 4 Training Plans.
Let me give you a little bit about the book in general. It's about 2/3 reading and 1/3 training plans. The reading consists of 25 short chapters, each one called a key. So 25 keys, basically the keys to running a fast 5K. There are 15 training keys, 5 lifestyle, diet and gear keys, and 5 keys for race day. And a bonus key for masters athletes. Excellent. I shall need that bonus key. There are various charts and tables through the book to demonstrate principles which are described visually in these charts and tables. Let me tell you a bit about Pete Magill. Only a bit, though, because if I was trying to tell you a lot about Pete Magill, I would probably use up the whole podcast. Pete Magill is a masters runner, coach, and writer. He's the lead author of the book Build Your Running Body, which we had a little discussion about before coming on air. Maybe we can come back to that. He's also the author of The Born Again Runner and Speed Runner, in addition to the book that we're talking about today, Fast 5K. Magill is a former senior writer and columnist for Running Times magazine, former editor for Double Runner magazine, and a frequent contributor to Runner's World and the Podium Runner website. In his 30s, Magill was a screenwriter with script sales to New Line Cinema and Disney. Ooh, maybe we could hear about bit about what went down there. Pete Magill has coached at the youth, high school, open, and masters level. And as a masters athlete, he's led his Southern California clubs to 19 national championships in cross-country and road racing. He's a 5 times USA Masters cross-country runner of the year, the fastest ever American distance runner over age 50 in the 5K and 10K. Maybe we'll ask him to give us the times. We know the times, but we'll ask him to tell us about that. And holds multiple American, world, and age group records. So welcome, Pete.
Well, thank you for having me.
Before I get on to our usual first question about what prompted you to write this book, maybe I could ask you about your running achievements and times in terms of the over 50s age group. Being an older runner myself, I'm keen to know what the elites
Well, the elites go through the exact same thing everybody else goes through, especially as you approach 50. Is anyone who is trained as a young runner, and by that I mean a runner in their 40s, well, actually anyone who's trained as a young runner in their teens, 20s, whatever, but then especially in your 40s, as you approach 50, you get near what you've heard about, that master's cliff. And what you want to do, and what I wanted to do, is all my training was geared towards getting as close to 50 as I could without tumbling off that cliff. I trained really hard up until the time I was 50. As I got to be 50, I began to feel the wheels starting to come off. I was putting myself together with Scotch tape and paper clips and, staples, and still managing to maintain times. 3 months before I turned 50, I ran a 14:45 5,000 on the track, then promptly got sick for 3 months and ended up not running another 5K for almost a year. when I was right before I turned 51, I ran a 5K on the road, and I managed to come back from numerous injuries at age 50. Could already see that cliff, looking over the edge of that cliff, but I ran a 15:01. It's significant that I ran 15:01 because no one had ever run under 15 minutes. The world record was 15 minutes. So my goal was 14:59. And man, I got to tell you, when I was coming into that finish line and I saw it tick to 15 and then 15:01, I crossed it. Somebody came up to me afterwards and they said, "Oh man, 15:01. God, how are you feeling about that?" I said, "Are you kidding? I'm 50 years old and I just ran 15:01. I feel great." I also ran a 10K in 31:11 when I was 50. And shortly thereafter, I ran a half marathon in 1:10:19. I only ran the half marathon because running times at the time used to rank all of their runners for various age groups. And even though I had set the American record at 5K and 10K for age 50, I didn't get ranked that year because 18 runners got ranked in the 15 to 54 division, and I didn't. And I asked the guy who was doing the ranking, "Well, why didn't I get ranked?" And he said, "Well, you didn't run a half marathon." And he said, "Everyone
Oh,
who ran a
wow.
half marathon could beat you. You only are a short distance runner." I said, "Well, what was the fastest half marathon?" And he said, "Well, 1:14." So I went out and ran 1:10 2 weeks later, and got the number
You
one
showed
ranking.
him.
And got the number one ranking the next year. And as I was celebrating, I missed that step at the edge of the cliff, started tumbling, and I've been tumbling ever since.
Oh no. So actually before we started recording, you said that after that half marathon, you didn't run for a while, or
I was
did you get
broken
in?
down.
Oh,
The half
really?
marathon, I might have showed him, but like I said, it put me over that cliff, and things have never been quite the same. I've still run very, I am not going to sit here and feel sorry for, where my performances went. I've run well. I enjoy running just as much, but that was the final race before, the reality of being in my 50s kicked in. One thing I write about, I believe in Fast 5K, is that a lot of people talk about aging. And, they say, well, age is only a number. You're only as old as you feel. Well, it's true. But here's the thing. I have the American record for 5,000 at 14:34 for age 45 to 49. I have the American record for the 5,000 for age 55 to 59 at 15:42. So age is just a number, but in that particular case, it's a number that's a minute and 8 seconds slower from age 45 to age 55. So the point
Wow.
is, it's only a number. And I got to tell you, I had just as much fun at the 55 time as I did at the 45 time, but it's a number that gets a little bit bigger. Not just the age number, but the time number. It just grows a little bit.
I think we all have to learn to live with that. But I think, I think I can live up quite happily with mine, and I'm sure you
Oh,
can live
yeah.
quite happily with yours.
Oh, yeah, because you stay fit.
Yeah.
You might get a little slower, but you still stay really fit. It's still just as much fun.
Okay, so back to Fast 5K, and what prompted you to write this book, and how did it come about?
Well, the Fast 5K originally came about. Two other running writers, Scott Douglas and Amby Burfoot, and myself were discussing the possibility of creating a website where we would sell like short articles, because we were so used to being underpaid as writers for Running Times and Competitor and Outside and various other publications. We thought we should create our own website, and we should put these articles up, short articles, 5,000 to 10,000 words, and we should sell the articles. And so I originally thought of Fast 5K as an article on 5K training. Now, I wrote it because in between my second book and my third book, my agent was negotiating with my publisher for that third book. and it went longer than expected. And I ended up with 3 weeks that I'd set aside to write the third book when I had nothing to do. And I said, well, what the heck? And I sat down and I spent 3 weeks and banged out what I then called 25 keys for running a faster 5K. And I sent it to Amby and Scott, and they were like, this is great, but you know what? We don't have time to do it anyway. So I ended up self-publishing that 3-week masterpiece on Amazon, through Amazon, and actually sold a few copies in its initial state. About, oh gosh, a year or two later, Velo Press got in touch with me and said they had just had one of their authors drop out of a book they had scheduled to be published in the fall, and it ended up being Scott Douglas pulling out, who was part of the original threesome. And they asked me if I would revamp 5K, if I would expand it, if I would create charts, if I would, basically rewrite it a little bit more professionally to create a book that they could put out. And I spent another 3 weeks working on it, and what resulted was the book we're talking about today, Fast 5K. And let me just say, as a writer, sometimes I really like the things I've done, and sometimes I just think what I've done is trash. Sometimes you're on deadline, you're pumping something out, you're like, oh, I don't even care. Okay, it's my 4th article on plantar fasciitis this year, whatever. And you send it out, and you're like, that exercise I said to do really isn't right. And you second guess it. This book, I think, actually hit a home run for me personally. It said things I want people to know about training. It explained things about training that runners and coaches ask me all the time, misunderstood things from tempo to what is actually tempo, what is VO2 max, why on earth would anyone run downhill fast in order to be a better runner? Why does anyone
I was actually pretty excited about that downhill running bit. Like, I love running downhill. I thought that was great that you just gave me an excuse to run downhill.
Yeah, I've got a bad story about that. Do you want to hear my bad downhill running story?
Oh, yes,
okay,
please.
and then can you finish it up with like you recommending that we all run downhill?
Oh yeah. Oh,
okay.
Absolutely
go ahead with the bad story.
Well, I originally talked about downhill running as a cure for quad pain in an article I did for either Running Times or Runner's World. I can't remember. It's on Runner's World's website now. But I wrote how, surprisingly enough, people will sometimes develop severe quad pain where it destroys your running. You can't even walk downstairs. Your quads suddenly hurt so badly. And I had this once when I was, I believe, 40, when I was 46. I had quad pain so bad that 3 weeks before the National Cross Country Championships, I couldn't run, at all. I couldn't walk downstairs. I couldn't even jog without being in severe pain. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to run nationals. And I did a bunch of research, and I read this weird thing where somebody said if you run downhill fast, it puts such an eccentric strain on your quadriceps that it literally triggers healing, because you damage them so badly that your body turns around and heals them. And so I went up.
There's another way. There's another way to do that. You can run a marathon.
Yeah.
Well, that's a way to get the quad pain to begin with, I think. But so I went up to the top of this hill, and I did a 2-mile fast run down this long hill, and I'll be darned if my legs didn't feel better. And I ended up winning the Masters National Cross Country Championship a couple weeks later, and I wouldn't have been able to do it. So anyway, so I wrote this article, and I said, but look, I did a lot of downhill running before I did that particular downhill run. I said, you need to go into it, starting with downhill strides, pick it up to downhill, maybe 30-second reps. And eventually, after a few weeks, you can run a sustained long downhill run. And I got an email a few weeks later from a reader who said, okay, my marathon is in a week and my legs are killing me. And so I didn't have time to do the stride. So I jumped straight to the long downhill run. And now I can't walk. What can I do? And I wrote back and I said, you can go back in time and do the strides first. You weren't ready for the downhill run. They ended up being unable to run for about 3 weeks and couldn't run their marathon. So I ruined
no.
that marathon with my advice. So that's my bad story about that. It's one of the risks you always run when you write books. You always run the risk of giving advice that's not followed or not communicated perfectly, and somebody ends up on the negative end of that.
You start the book, just winding you back. Are you finished talking about downhills, Liz?
Oh, sure.
No, I'm sure you are Pete, but what about Liz? Are you finished talking about downhills, Liz?
Oh no,
we can
we can keep going. Yeah. I mean, he like basically it was already sold to me, so we're gonna run some downhill strides.
Yeah,
they're just too fun. They're too fun.
Our coach is pretty interested in downhill running, but he's not sure that we would take it in the manner that it's offered. So if he hears us talking about this, he's going to have downhill running back on our agenda. We're doing the uphills at the moment. We'll come to that soon.
All right.
But you start the book talking about setting reasonable goals instead of too big and scary ones. But we often hear that we should sort of set, big, reach for the stars, and if you believe you can, you can. So how a reasonable goal is going to get us to personal bests?
Well, first of all, I completely believe in reaching for the stars and unreasonable goals and all of that. They're just not going to help you in the short term. Okay, in the short term, you can't get to that unreasonable goal right off. And shooting, or if you can, even shooting for that unreasonable goal is going to have a negative effect on your training. Training is a process of incrementally changing your body. You can't go out and run a workout today that gives you a new body tomorrow. Okay, if you run that kind of workout, you will have a new body tomorrow. It'll be a very sore body that can't get off the couch, that screams for somebody to bring you Advil and maybe a pack of Doritos, because you're going to be watching Netflix for a week before you feel like you can walk right again. Okay, so since you can only incur incremental change, okay, you want to shoot for the workouts that can create that change. Setting a goal before you've done proper training and before you've started that incremental process is not a rational way to go. You don't know what your final goal is going to be. Until you've done proper training, you have no idea what your body can accomplish. You have no idea how long it will take your body to accomplish that. What I could accomplish at age 25 versus what I can accomplish now that I'm age 61 in a period of time is completely different. Okay, what you can accomplish varies depending on your innate physiology. It depends on your age. It depends on all the other factors, things going on in your life. How much sleep are you getting? How stressful is your work? Are you a parent who is stressed from work and lack of sleep and being a parent? Because I know that story. And so the point is, until you start correct training, you don't know what those goals are. And if your goal is, I'm going to get better, if what you are doing every day is doing training that is solely aimed at improvement, you're eventually going to get to that goal. In the meantime, every time you improve should be a success. If I start out as an 18-minute, I had a runner who started out as a 19-minute, as a 20-minute 5K runner, and they wanted to get to 15 minutes. Okay, well, first of all, I told them that probably wasn't a reasonable goal. I said, let's shoot for 18 minutes, given his background. I talked to him, I don't throw out a number like that offhand. Well, he still couldn't get in his mind that that was reasonable. He started at 20. 3 months later, he ran 19 minutes and he quit because he hadn't achieved his goal. Okay, it was an unreasonable goal to want to come out and go from 20 minutes to 15. He improved a minute,
That's a lot.
Yeah. And was disappointed because he had set an unreasonable goal. If his goal was improvement, he would have gone, oh my gosh, I just ran 19 minutes. Okay. And we would have gotten to 18. And he might have been happy with 18. Now he set a goal of 15 minutes. He was never going to run that. Okay. He was 48 at the time. All right. He was never going to run that. And so he was never going to experience that self-satisfaction. I won't call it joy, because sometimes it's joy, but mostly it's the self-satisfaction of applying yourself to a training program and finding that improvement. There's nothing like it when it comes to running and sports. And in our sport, we're lucky because we've got a clock that tells us we actually were successful. So take your time, make your goal improvement. Sure, have those ideas about what you're going to run off in the distance, but first, let's see what you can do. Let's get better first.
Great advice. So hold your ambition, but let's be incremental about your goals and your milestones.
Yeah. A good goal is to train correctly for the next 6 months and see where it leads you.
So I guess since we're going to talk about training correctly, there's this, and most runners have heard of it, the 10% rule for increasing mileage. I mean,
Yes.
I've always kind of thought this was confusing, because sometimes if you're coming back to running after just like a break, I mean, I haven't respected the 10% rule, because I'll go from running like 50K a week to running like more like 80, you know,
Right.
maybe the next week, because my baseline is maybe like 90 or 100. So I've never really respected the 10% rule. And then sometimes I found that the 10% rule is too much. And in your book, you actually prefer the 3-week rule. So maybe you can explain what you think is wrong with the 10% rule, and how people can use the 3-week rule instead.
Well, the first thing that's wrong with the 10% rule, and I'm embarrassed, I'm showing my age because I can't remember the name of the gentleman who first wrote about the 10% rule. And it's terrible because we talked about it, and I used to exchange emails with him 15 years ago about this. The first problem with the 10% rule is that he made it up. Okay. The 10% rule isn't based on anything. He talked to a whole bunch of runners and came up with the 10% rule. And he was a writer for Runner's World and wrote about the 10% rule. And suddenly we are all following the 10% rule. Okay. So that's the first problem with it. It's not a bad idea. You know, the truth is almost all injury comes because people don't have any sort of basic foundation for improving volume, or basic idea about how to improve volume. And they just improve way too quickly. I feel good today, so I'm going to run farther and faster. That is how we did it in the 70s when I started running. And that is why we had so many injuries in the 70s. I think we had about 80% runners got injured every year back then. But so it's a whole lot better, you know, to start out with a rule like, oh, I'm going to follow this 10% rule, and limit yourself to how much you increase that volume, only because people were crazy about it. You know, people would start out running, you know, they'd go out and they'd do 3 miles a day for 3 days, 1 week, and they'd go, hey, I can do 5 miles a day. Well, hey, that felt okay. I think I should do 50 miles a week. Hey, what happened? I've got a stress fracture. Okay. They go, what happened? I must have stepped wrong or something. No, you just went from 0 to 50 miles a week in under a month. So the 10% rule works that way. The 3-week rule is also sort of made up. Okay. The 3-week rule is based more on the physiological precedent that it takes a few weeks for your body to adapt to increases in volume and intensity. Your muscles will adapt a lot more quickly than things like your connective tissue will adapt. A lot of people don't realize things like bones and tendons and ligaments are living tissue. Your bones are alive, okay? They react to training the same way as muscles do. You put a stress on bones, bones get stronger. They increase the rate that they repair old, or that they replace old bone. They increase the bone density of the area of the bone that's being trained with. Same thing for tendons. Okay, ligaments maybe not so much. Ligaments are pretty much what you got to begin with, which is why don't ever injure a ligament if you don't have to. But so
Good
bones
advice.
kind of lag a little bit. So give your bones a chance to catch up to your muscles. Okay, give your whole system, give your energy systems time to adapt. Give your muscle cells time to build bigger gas tanks for carbohydrate stores, what we call muscle glycogen. Give your nervous system a chance to readjust to how it's firing muscles. Your nervous system has a heck of a job when you run. Your nervous system has to put all of your muscle, not only your muscle fibers in sync, but muscles across multiple joints have to contract and relax at the exact right time so that you keep moving forward instead of crumbling into a puddle, 2 steps into your run. So it takes about 3 weeks for everything to adapt. Again, it's going to be different in a 20-year-old than in a 60-year-old. It's going to be different from one person to the next. The whole idea of the 3-week rule is, though, the general principle is it takes 3 weeks for your body to be ready for the next level. I always say once you're spinning your wheels at one volume of distance and intensity, once it's like you're on a bike and you're ready to shift gears because you're moving your pedals so quickly it doesn't even feel like you're pedaling anymore or that you're putting any muscle into it, that's the time to switch into a new gear. That's the time to add more volume and more intensity and more distance volume.
It makes a lot of sense. One of the things that Liz and I noticed a few years ago, we were training for a marathon using the Hansen's marathon plan.
Right.
And in that plan, there's a very key sort of race pace, tempo type run that happens every week. And we noticed that it would only go up every 3rd week. So you do 3 weeks and it was an increased distance. So you might, your run might be at 8K or 10K. And you go, oh, damn, this is really hard at this speed. and then next week it would be the same. And if everything was working well, you'd go, okay, well, that was tough, but not so difficult. And then the 3rd week, you'd say, okay, I'm handling this. And then next week it would go up, and and you were in 3-week blocks. So
exactly,
Luke Humphreys obviously prescribes to the 3-week rule.
Yeah, I haven't actually read that book, although I'm a big fan of the results. He had a tremendous club and some tremendous marathoners. And so while I haven't read the book, obviously you can't argue with results.
Yeah.
And it doesn't surprise me.
Don't worry if you haven't read it. Just go back to one of our very early episodes where Liz and I discuss it. We'll tell you all about it there.
There you go. The cliff notes of reading running books.
Exactly, kind of. So I guess I can ask about VO2 max. So if I understand correctly, VO2 max is a single number, but VO2 max paces in training are actually a range of paces, because you say that VO2 max training can be 3K pace, 5K pace, and even 10K pace. So how would you choose your training pace? And would you try to train at all the different paces in one training cycle, or is it really like specific to the type of runner, which kind of pace they decide?
Well, yeah, a lot of it has to do, first of all, for, one of the things I found in writing running books that I've tried to be very careful about. I read a lot of and listened to a lot about running before I knew anything about it. And I noticed people use terms and they expect me to understand what they are, and I didn't understand what they are. People talked about muscle fibers for you. And I'm like, what the heck is a muscle fiber? That's why in every one of my books, you'll see a little, parenthetical that says a science-y term for a muscle cell, just because I don't want people to think that something weird is happening. VO2 max just if anybody doesn't know, is the amount of oxygen the term is consume, but once again, that would confuse you. When you think of VO2 max, just think this is the amount of oxygen that your body can actually use in your muscle fibers to create aerobic energy. I can breathe in a ton of oxygen. You know, I always compare it to a gas tank. I could bring, if I had a gas tank and it held 10 gallons and I filled it with 20, I still only have 10 gallons, you know? And with oxygen, I can breathe in all this oxygen, but if I can't process it down in my muscle fibers, in my muscle cells, and turn it into aerobic energy, I'm not consuming it. Okay, so my VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen I can bring in and actually use to create aerobic energy. It becomes very important because the higher my VO2 max is, the more oxygen I can turn into aerobic energy, the more aerobic energy I have to fuel my legs. I will be able to fuel muscle fibers that never used aerobic energy before, okay? So it's a prime target for training. Whether you're running the mile or you're running the marathon, you need to improve this VO2 max. Well, now, in order to improve VO2 max, you have to run at a pace that is relatively near to VO2 max. What that means is you're running so fast that your body needs to use all the oxygen it can turn into energy. If I'm out jogging, I don't need to create all the energy that my body is capable of producing. I can create a little bit of energy and I'm just fine. But when I'm running at about 3,000 meter pace, okay, which is about, let's just say about 2-mile pace for those of us who don't use the metric system, about 3K pace for those who do. When I'm running there, I'm using about the maximum amount of oxygen I can produce, okay? In order to improve that, I have to train at least 90% of VO2 max, okay? Now, for some runners, that means I train at 5K pace. I'm still training at 90+% of my VO2 max. I'm still having to create that much. You know, the race pace is still demanding that much aerobic energy, okay? For some really good runners, we can train at 10K pace and still be at 90% plus VO2 max, okay? But you got to be in pretty good shape for that. So a really elite runner can train at 10K pace and still improve. A non-elite runner can train at 5K pace and still improve. You can train at 3K pace, only you kind of run the risk of training too hard. Like, what if it's a day when you're a little bit tired or you're not quite ready to go? You train at 3K pace, maybe it's too much. You're not really getting more benefit than you would if you were training at 5K pace, and you're taking the risk of being overly fatigued. So why not just train at 5K pace? You know, you get the workout, you get the improvement, and you don't run the risk. Which answers the other question, what's the best pace? The best pace would be about 5K pace. Why you might see an elite racer training at 10K pace is they're already racing so hard and running other workouts that are so hard that they need to just run a little bit easier on VO2 max day. But I can't stress enough that if you aren't training VO2 max training, you are not going to be a top 5K runner. And for those of you out there who have read articles about training and they've said, well, your VO2 max doesn't change that much, so you don't have to worry about it so much. It doesn't change much once you've trained for a decade really hard. But for everybody else, you need to train it. And for masters runners, you have to train it a lot because our VO2 max drops every year if we don't.
And so for VO2 max, is it a bit like, because what I've heard about lactate threshold is that if you go over lactate threshold, you're actually not training it, you're just training too hard and you don't get the benefit of like raising your lactate threshold. Is VO2 max a bit the same thing, or is VO2 max different? Like, let's say that you do end up running too fast for your VO2 max session. will you still get the VO2 max training, or are you now
You'll get it,
not?
but remember, over VO2 max, at VO2 max, you're already using a lot of anaerobic energy. Over VO2 max, you're now supplementing. You have to get the energy to run from somewhere. And if you can't get it all aerobically, you're going to have to supplement it anaerobically. And anaerobic energy is it's not something you can continue to produce for a long amount of time at a substantial volume. B, producing it at all has some negative side effects. Lactate threshold is basically a very low usage of anaerobic energy. When you use anaerobic energy, you have two immediate byproducts. One is acidic hydrogen ions, which actually lower the pH of your muscle fibers. And if you're a 400-meter runner, it leads to that booty lock that your entire legs feel like they're on fire and you can't move anymore. The other thing it produces is lactate. Okay, and lactate threshold, they're generally talking about a lactate amount in your bloodstream. I believe it's, what is it, like 3.5 millimoles or something like that. But it's a level where you've just gone from easily handling the side effect of anaerobic energy production to actually having to buffer it a little bit more within the cell. And the better you can teach your cells to use lactate as an energy source, or to buffer the hydrogen ions that are being produced along with lactate, the faster you can run at lactate threshold. So you're trying to raise the point where you can run at a slightly anaerobic level, okay, where you can run at a pace that's slightly greater at a little bit bigger anaerobic level. Just so we're clear, lactate itself is a good thing. Okay, lactate is a carbohydrate energy source, and a well-trained runner, one who does a lot of lactate threshold work, will take 80% of the lactate produced within the cell, will shuttle it over to these little power plants in your cells called mitochondria, and will turn it into aerobic energy. The other lactate will go into the bloodstream, which is where you get the readings for lactate, where it'll go on. And lactate is the only energy source to run your heart during hard racing, and you can actually drop it off in some of the cells around that aren't being used for running. But so it's a little bit different. VO2 max, when you go over, you get some very negative byproducts of it and serious fatigue. Lactate threshold training, you go over and you kind of lose this thing where you're trying to learn how to use more lactate and buffer more anaerobic energy, and you're just moving into a fatigue state where you're going to get tired quickly and you're not going to do a volume of work where you get the adaptation you're after.
When I was a bit younger, and a little bit now, I was sort of known in the club to have a bit of a finishing kick. And I used to say, yeah, I can kick, but I can only do it once, and I can only do it at the end. And once I've done it, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. And I guess that's because I was basically doing an anaerobic effort at the end. And then I've got no ability to run virtually afterwards.
No, that's, I always tell my runners, you get one move. So you decide when you want to use that one move. Another thing, while we're talking about anaerobic energy and you talk about the finish, the two most anaerobic parts of a race, finishing kick is one. What's the other most anaerobic part?
I would say it's the beginning. That's how I feel.
Trying to get out of bed in the morning.
The first lap. The first lap of your I guess of your
it's the start, because your aerobic system doesn't kick in immediately physiologically. It's a delayed system, so it's going to kick in, but you have to train it to kick in as soon as possible. But physiologically, it doesn't kick in on second number one.
No, physiologically, you start running and your energy needs immediately go up. Your body knows you need to create more aerobic energy, but it needs to get more oxygen to your cells before you can create more aerobic energy. It takes about 30 seconds to breathe in that extra oxygen and get it down to your cells. So you have a 30 to 40-second delay before you have the oxygen you need to produce more aerobic energy. So you produce a ton of anaerobic energy to get off the line. One of the keys in Fast 5K about racing says no sprinting off the start line. And that's because you sprint off the start line, it's all anaerobic, baby. You know, you go off a start line, the pace you run of 400 meters, and you think, well, I'm only going to do 150 meters of it. Okay, you are in that anaerobic state. You are where, Alan, you talked about being at the end of the race.
Mm-hmm.
You're at a spot where you don't want to go any farther. And you are going to have to slow down so much in order to allow your body to clear out those byproducts of anaerobic energy production, that by the time you get back on your stride, the race is going to be gone. So yeah, you've got to be very careful at the beginning of a race because of the anaerobic energy demand. Keep it reasonable.
Okay, good advice. Moving on a little bit. Yesterday, I was doing a training session. Liz will know because she ducked out of this. She went off doing some soft session somewhere. But I was doing a training session, which was with the club, which was a whole set of hill repeats, 200-meter hill repeats, so quite quick hill repeats. And hills appear in, I think, more than one of your keys. There are at least 2 keys which have advocates for hill sessions. So why are hills useful to getting fast on the flat, and what are good ways to introduce them into your training?
Hills are, and I probably write this in the book, you know, I write it, yeah, in a lot of articles in my books. Hills are running's worst kept secret. Okay, if you aren't running hills, you aren't becoming the runner that you can be. I was lucky. I grew up in a city, La Cañada, the canyon, and I was in the base of it. And every single run we did, I started in high school, and every single run we did went up a hill. We ran hill runs, hill repeats, whatever. We were a small school, about 1,500 kids. And I know on my track team alone, we had 11 guys under 2 minutes for the half mile, which is like 11 guys under 1:59 for 800 meters. And I actually went back and coached there for a couple of years. I coached there 2 years ago and took my girls out. I was coaching the girls team and took them out on those same hill repeats, same hill runs. And our girls went from, well, we broke our school record in the 4x800. We ran 9 flat for 4x800, average 2:15 a leg for my high school girls, and broke the school record by a couple minutes, and we're the fastest team in state. And the secret wasn't that it was a good coach. Secret wasn't that it was good runners, although I would say our runners and our coach were okay. The secret was that the coach took his runners out on hills and developed them for their potential. There are a bunch of reasons that hills are better. Okay, hills, if you're on a distance run with hills, they require that you use more of the muscle fibers within the muscles in your legs. A common misconception among runners is that when you're running at a slow pace, fast pace, uphill or downhill, you're using all your running muscles, all your quads, all your hammies, all your calves. You're just using them a little less intensely or a little more intensely. And the truth is that's not what's happening. Every muscle group, your calves, your hamstrings, your quadriceps, is made up of muscle fibers. You have 3 different muscle fiber types. You have slow twitch, you have intermediate fast twitch, you have fast twitch. Okay, you only recruit as many of those muscle fibers as you need in order to run whatever you're doing. I equate it to moving into a second floor apartment. Okay, if I'm moving into a second floor apartment, I can carry the lamps up by myself. Okay, that's slow twitch. That's your slow twitch muscle fibers. Okay, now I want to carry up a table. I need help because now it's heavier. It's asking for more. Okay, so I got to get a friend to help me carry up a table. Those are my intermediate fibers. Okay, I bring my intermediate fibers in. Now I got a refrigerator I want to carry up. Okay, my buddy and I can't carry a refrigerator up that stairs by ourselves. So we get our other guy, our big strong guy who likes lounging on the couch until he's absolutely called into work. And he comes in and the three of us carry that refrigerator up. Okay, that's fast twitch. The third guy is fast twitch. And the third guy is our big, strong friend who he carries that refrigerator up the stairs. And he says, now I'll be lying on the couch and eating what was in the refrigerator because I need a rest. Okay, you only use the amount of muscle fibers you need in order to do what you're doing. If you're out on a distance run on the flat, you are only probably using slow twitch muscle fiber. You pick it up a little bit, you bring in some of your intermediate fibers. You run tempo pace, okay, that lactate threshold pace we were talking about. You bring in about half your intermediate fibers. The problem is when you're running a 5K, you aren't bringing in just your slow twitch fibers and just about half your intermediate fibers. To run a 5K, you're going to need, it's like carrying that refrigerator up the stairs. At some point, you're going to need the big guns to come in there, which means you have to train them. Okay, when you run up a hill, you make that big guy get off the couch and come help you get up the hill because you're fighting gravity. Okay, the guy who helped you carry the table is going to be there the whole way. You know, he doesn't even wait. You're like, get over here, get over here. He helps you from the start. The harder that hill gets, the more you need to bring in support. You bring in the big guns, you bring in the fast twitch fibers. Okay, you train all of them when you go up a hill. Okay, so that's what hill running for distance does. When you get into a hill run for a repetition, there are a number of things you're working. Okay, now you have to get up that hill fast. Okay, but you have to get up that hill fast with a reduced stride because since you're climbing up a hill, your knee may go up where it normally goes up, but your foot is going to land higher than it started at. Okay, you're not going to get, you know, when we talk about creating force when our foot hits the ground, we talk about the hammer hitting the nail. Okay, you lift the hammer, that's your knee lift, you bring your foot down, pop, that's hitting the nail. On a hill, your foot can't come down as far, which means you don't generate as much force. You have to generate that extra force that normally you got from just smacking the ground with your foot by actually putting muscle into it. Okay, so going up a hill forces you to create more of the force you need for your next stride from your muscles. Your muscles get better at producing that force quickly. You get back on the flat now, you have muscles that didn't want to be trained on flat training, that were trained on the hills. You have muscles through hill repeats that have learned how to produce more force quickly because they were required to do so in order for you to get up that hill. You end up with a faster stride and a stronger stride. You get a quicker cadence, you get a stronger stride, a longer stride length. Combine longer stride length with quicker cadence, and you are a faster runner. Everybody's done it. Seb Coe lived on hills and set 11 world records. You know, the Kenyans have run hills for generations. Hills are the backbone for strong running.
Well, I guess I'm missing out then.
You need to get out of your soft, cushy indoor track on the flat and get on the
except that it's
icy
warm in
winter
there.
hill
No.
sprints with us, Liz.
Oh no, but it's so warm in there, and like I don't have to wear all those long johns and things. It's so
That's
nice.
Montreal. Yeah, you have to come down to Southern California to train for the winter.
There
We'll give you hills and better weather.
So I guess we can move on from hills to long runs because, you know, some people think that, oh, well, if they're only running 5K, they don't need to do a long run. But you advocate for long runs that can be more than 90 minutes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how long would you aim to get? Like, I know for marathoners, you know, we have like in terms of kilometers, we'll try and aim for a long run that's like 30 to 35 kilometers in our training. But what about 5K runners? Like you do it in terms of time, but is there sort of like a maximum that you would prescribe? for a 5K
Yeah,
runner?
absolutely. The long run is a key to any training. When you look at training for a race, you don't look at race distance. You don't look at race time. You look at what factors are going to go into producing that race. What muscle fibers am I going to use? What energy systems am I going to use? What kind of nervous system involvement is there? Well, the energy systems I'm going to use to run a 5K. A 5K is 90 to 95% aerobic energy, okay, fuel. All right, so if it's 90 to 95% aerobic energy fueled, I'm not talking about, well, what distance should I run? I'm talking about, well, what can I do to improve my ability to produce aerobic energy? Okay, one of the key ways you increase your ability to produce aerobic energy is with the long run. Now, there's a very simple reason for this. In every one of your cells, and this is another one of these misconceptions. People think of their body as like a car. Okay, I've got an engine and I've got a gas tank, and I fill the gas tank and I run. Well, that's not how your body works. In your body, every single one of your muscle cells has its own gas tank. Okay, and that gas tank needs to be not only full, but that gas tank needs to be enlarged in order for you to produce more aerobic energy. Okay, you need to go down, when you run a long run, what you do is you take the slow twitch fibers you're using for that long run, because remember, we talked about like the apartment analogy. Well, on a long run, you're probably using almost all slow twitch fiber for the first 90 minutes. Okay, you need to drain your gas tanks. You won't do that in a 60-minute run. You have enough energy stored within those muscle fibers to go 60 minutes. As you get near 90 minutes of a distance run, you start emptying out those gas tanks. Those muscle fibers, just like a car that's run out of gas, start sputtering a little bit. Suddenly they're pulled off on the side of the road and they can't go anymore. And what your body does when one of those runs out of gas are two things. The first thing it does is it recruits another muscle cell to take its place, one that wasn't being used before. So now instead of using, say, 80% of your slow twitch fibers for a distance run, you're going to have to recruit more. You're going to end up using about 100% of your slow twitch fibers when you're going over 90 minutes. Okay, you're now draining the gas tanks on all of those muscle fibers, plus you're strengthening those muscle fibers. And remember, when we get to a 5K, we're going to have to use all those muscle fibers. That's like taking that refrigerator up the stairs, okay? We're going to use all of them when we get to the 5K. So if we're only training 60 to 80% of them on a distance run, a lot of them aren't going to be ready to go. At 90 minutes, we've drained the gas tank, we bring in more. Not only do we bring in slow twitch fibers, we bring in intermediate fibers to back up slow twitch fibers that are pulled off to the side of the road. Okay, so now we are training intermediate fibers aerobically. And believe me, you want to train intermediate fibers aerobically because that is your eventual road to success in racing, whether it's a 5K or a marathon. Okay, so now you've trained more muscle fibers, ones that don't normally get trained. You've drained their gas tanks. What happens post-run? Post-run, your body goes, okay, idiot, you didn't have enough fuel, and you didn't realize you didn't have enough fuel, and you ran out of your fuel. So I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to give you a bigger gas tank. And it goes in and it allows you to increase the amount of carbohydrate you keep, what's called muscle glycogen, within each muscle cell. You take those little old gas tanks you got started with, and you can make them twice as big as when you started over a period of, not after one run, obviously, but over a training period of, 6 months to a year. You can double in size those gas tanks within each muscle fiber. Now you have twice as much aerobic energy. You can either go faster now because you have more aerobic energy, or you can go farther. Either way, you've improved your ability to race from everywhere from 5K to the marathon.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Hey, one other thing I just want to say, going back to that central governor and Tim Noakes and the idea of your body, keeping track of of every resource you have before it decides what it's going to let you run. Your body, within 3 seconds of starting a run, checks your muscle glycogen stores, and it decides how many muscle fibers it's going to let you use and how fast it's going to allow you to run. So within 3 seconds, your brain checks your muscle glycogen, your carbohydrate fuel stores, and that will determine how fast you run a race or how fast you can run a workout. Another reason to build those stores. You can only do that with long runs. So
Okay.
get out there, do your long run. The maximum, you aren't a marathoner. A marathoner might do, a 2.5 to a 3.5 hour long run. You don't need to go over 2 hours. Okay, you will get all the benefit you need in 2 hours. Save, you can only train so much in a week and recover from it. Save it for the other stuff that a marathoner doesn't need. A marathoner doesn't need the speed work you might need or some of the other things. Save your recovery energy for those. So 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Speaking personally, drills and plyometrics, those kind of exercises are something that I have a tendency to skimp on. And I think probably if we look at our club, when we go, oh, we're doing a fast track session. No, we need to do a whole series of drills. Everybody goes, oh, do we have to do that? So let's give you an opportunity with one of your keys to tell us about the importance of drills. Why are they important? How often should we do them?
If you're a masters runner, drills are the most important workout you'll do. Okay, I'll lead off with that. I'll also lead off with the fact that I first started drills. I'm 61 now. I first learned most of the technique drills that I do now when I was 21. I moved to Eugene, Oregon, the mecca of track in the US at the time. And though I didn't train with Nike's team there, Athletics West, I did train with a couple of the runners when they weren't training with the club. They used to take me under the bleachers at Hayward Field in the rain during the winter in Eugene, and on the runway under the gravel area under those bleachers, they taught me these weird drills that this exercise physiologist Nike had brought on staff to assist the coaches had come up with to teach our bodies, nervous systems, how to better control our muscles. And this weird exercise physiologist was named Jack Daniels, who has since gone on to be considered, Runner's World named him the best coach in the world at one point. But he was getting started and he taught these weird drills and I learned them. And for the next 10 to 15 years, wherever I was, including when I was in Australia for a period of time, I would go find a park and I would do these skipping, bounding, hopping drills, these quick feet drills in parks, and people would look at me. They'd take a double look. If they had kids, they'd steer them away to another part of the park. Other people would just shake their head and think, who is this guy doing this weird stuff? He must be with a cult of some sort. I've never seen anything that weird.
It might be Monty Python's Ministry of Silly Walks or something.
Right. Yes, I was getting my Monty Python routine ready. But the thing is, they now have come into vogue. And most of the drills that are in my book come from those sessions under the bleachers at Hayward Field all those years ago. Some people will argue, I know Steve Magnus argues that a lot of drills don't actually mimic what your nervous system does. And therefore, they aren't necessarily useful for training. But while they don't necessarily exactly mimic what your nervous system does and how it controls muscles, it does mimic some of the aspects of running. Bounding not only teaches you how to produce forward horizontal force, it strengthens all the muscles that are involved in forward horizontal force. There's a drill in there called high knees, where on the balls of your feet, you just lift your knees up really fast, like you were sprinting, just almost in place, moving forward really slowly. I know a lot of people do a similar drill called, I think 100 ups, they call them. And but in my drill, you're actually moving forward a little. But what you're doing is you're teaching your foot to come down on the ball of the foot, stop the downward. You're actually driving the foot down. You're stopping it at the as it hits the ground and bouncing it back with elastic recoil. You're teaching your body to utilize elastic recoil, that bounce when your foot first hits and brings the knee back up, okay, which is so important to running. For those of your listeners who don't understand what elastic recoil is another sciencey term, which just means you're storing the energy in your tendons and muscles that is generated when your foot hits the ground. If you think of a pogo stick, every time you come down on a pogo stick, the pogo stick compresses, and when it releases, it springs you back into the air. Okay, with elastic recoil, your tendons are actually stretching, but it's producing the same effect as the pogo stick. It's more like a slingshot in this case, where you're stretching the slingshot and letting it go, and it zings forward. Okay, every time you land, you stretch your Achilles tendon, you stretch your arch, you stretch your patellar tendon, your quadriceps tendon. Okay, you store energy from that stretch, which is created by nothing more than the gravity of you hitting the ground, okay, and braking. And that energy, that free energy, provides more than 50% of the energy you'll use to get back off the ground when you release that slingshot and let it go. Okay, so it's incredibly important to train that elastic recoil. And a lot of drills are just about training your body to utilize that elastic recoil, because the more you can utilize elastic recoil, the less force you have to create with your muscles. The less force you have to create with your muscles, the less time your foot has to spend on the ground. The less time your foot spends on the ground, the faster you get out of one stride and into the next. And that's what speed is all about.
And so, how many times a week would you recommend that runners, like let's say that they're able to get to the once a week, but like, would you recommend that they do it more than once a week?
No,
Okay,
absolutely not. This is another thing, and one of the keys to training is doing the least amount possible to get 100% of the adaptation you're after. Okay, a lot of people overdoing it is because they don't actually understand what the workout is doing. Okay, and they don't understand how your body responds to it. Drills, it's not like getting better in the bench press, where you have to go in and work out a few times a week to continue to get the muscle fibers to adapt. Drills are teaching your nervous system to better control aspects of your stride. All right. It's why I recommend doing a stride after every drill. I want what you just taught your nervous system as far as its control of muscles. I want you to immediately do a stride and build that into your natural stride. Okay. Your nervous system learning starts immediately. Okay. You have short learning, you have long learning, but you immediately affect change with drills. Something I'll tell you about drills: go do a set of the drills as they are in this book. If you aren't running your distance faster the next day without trying, don't ever do the drills again. Okay? You do a full set of these drills, you include the strides, you take the correct recovery between drills. Let me just say right off, I've never met a distance runner who can't turn any workout into a distance run. Don't turn this workout into a distance run. It's not a distance run. It's a different workout. Okay? So do the drills. Take the time between drills to allow your nervous system to incorporate what you just made it do, and also to allow your body to fully recover the energy system that you used to do the drills. Do it one day, go out the next day, you'll be a better runner. You do not have to do it again during the week. Come back the next week, do it again. Okay.
Okay.
Take off a week, come back and do it again. What I always
Okay.
tell people is do 5 to 6 sessions of drills over a course of about 8 to 10 weeks, and you will have improved your stride, and those improvements will stick with you for months. Okay. You will get 3 to 6 months where those improvements will stick with you before you have to go back and do another 8 to 10 week session where you get 5 to 6 weeks of the drills. But nothing is more important than including drills, especially for older runners.
Wow, I think you just sold those drills to the rest of our team. They'll be, more willing to do them, I think now. I guess talking about something that we should do more than once is maybe not more than once in 1 week, but from the story that I gave you at the beginning about my 5K. So I kind of mentioned that the first 5K is never the best one. And that's kind of been my experience with the shorter distances in general, even like, let's say the 1500 or the 3000 on the track. It was, you never got it right the first time. It's like you needed several of those races, and then it finally all came together. And you talk about tune-up races in your book and to schedule them in advance. So why are they important? And I guess how many should we have?
Right. Tune-up races are incredibly important. This goes back to your nervous system and your brain controlling your running. You can train for months and become a better runner, and your brain still doesn't know if you're ready to run as hard as your body is trained to run. It's like a parent, holding on the keys to their car when their teenager has just gotten their learner's permit or their driver's license. You aren't quite sure they're ready to take that car out on their own yet. Okay, well, that's why your brain is with you when it's been a while since you've raced. I use a story in the book about runner Diana that I coached, and it's a true story. She came to me wanting to become a better 5K runner. She'd run 23:09. She hadn't done a lot of effective training, and I thought this is somebody who's going to easily improve. And I told her, sure, let's train for 3 months though before we race again. You want to actually get that incremental improvement in before you go do a race. So we trained for 3 months. She went out to run a race, and I warned her. I said, we have to do a tune-up race first. You're a better runner than when you ran 23:09, but your body doesn't trust you to take that new runner's body you built out for a spin without killing yourself. You're going to run yourself too hard. You're going to overheat. You're going to do something which damages me, and I'm not going to let you do it. And she was like, fine, fine, fine. And she went out and she ran 23:03, which is basically the same time she ran before training. And she was so disappointed. She thought, oh my gosh, I just did all that training and got nothing out of it. And I said, no. I warned you about this. I said, we're going to take 2 weeks to recover and we're going to run another race. We went out 2 weeks later, and I believe, can't remember, it's been a while. I think she ran 22:18 for her next race. So she improved almost a minute in 2 weeks. We went out a couple weeks after that, and she ran a low 21, a 21:13 or something like that. Okay, she improved 2 minutes in 4 weeks. We went out about, I think it was 3 weeks after that, and she ran 20:23. Okay, so almost 3 minutes of improvement. I turned to her and I said, after the 20:23, I said, do you really think that you improved 6 seconds in 3 months and improved 3 minutes in the last few weeks? I said, it took your brain every one of those races to allow you to run a little harder. It took you that long to have confidence in your new fitness to run that harder, to challenge when you should challenge instead of pulling back thinking, oh my God, I can't maintain this. I can't maintain this. It took that long for you to be ready to put the training and the fitness you had acquired to work and make it work for you. So that was a 3-minute improvement, which I think is par for course for people who haven't trained correctly. If you've been training really hard and correctly with a good coach, and you train according to Fast 5K, and you only improve 30 seconds, don't come shouting at me if you already had good training. But if you haven't had great training, you can see incredible improvement. I just had somebody email me about a month and a half ago who started at 21 minutes when they started with my book and had just run a 15:32. Okay, so now that was a young person. Okay, that was a young person. But my point is, if you've been doing incorrect training and you take the time and then you have the patience, tune-up races, how many does it take, you ask? It depends. Did you race a lot in the past? Maybe only one. Are you fairly new to racing? It might take 3 or 4, like it did with Diana. Okay. A lot of high school kids, I like I said, I coached high school runners the past few years. It might take them an entire season. So it depends, but it takes a while for your brain to allow you to actually run your best.
So I guess you probably kind of answered the question already, but like, do you think that there is any possibility that someone can treat a 5K like a marathon? A marathon, you have a training cycle, you get to the end, you run your race, and you're expected to run your best run. But in the 5K, would that even be possible, or it's not?
I don't think it's possible.
Okay.
Because it's a higher intensity run and you're activating more muscle fiber for it. So you have you activate more muscle fiber by sending more nervous impulse, a greater volume of nervous impulses to the nerves that control it. So it's a far more intense effort, and it takes a while for your brain to be ready to allow you to do that. With a marathon, you should still be doing a tune-up race. But your tune-up race for a marathon might be a 5K. It might be a half marathon, but then you have to run it a little ways out. The marathon is different because you can't come back a week or two later and run another marathon.
Mm-hmm.
So your training has to prepare you to go out and give the effort you're ready to run. Nowadays, I guess people are running more marathons. I come from an era where, nobody ran more than 2 marathons in a year because it was all you could handle. You trained up to a marathon, you ran your marathon, you spent a month recovering, you started a new training cycle, and you ran another marathon. And that was about all you could handle.
I think that's still the guidance. Like if you're going for your marathon to run your best marathon, I think that's still kind of the thing that's recommended is like 1 or 2 a year.
Yeah, I think people collect marathons, for the badges basically, and they don't run all out.
Yeah, they aren't really racing it. One of the things I said when I was going to run a marathon at 50 and then ended up not running it. As I mentioned to you, I can't remember if it was before we started recording or after, Runner's World had promoted me as going to run my first marathon ever when I was at age 50. And then when I ended up not running it because I didn't acquire the fitness, again, at age 50, you can't always dictate when you're going to get fit. Things change. But when I didn't run it, and some people got down on me and they said, "Oh, you could have finished it. Come on, you could have." And I said, "Look, my long run is 20 miles. I could easily run another 6 miles, but that would just be a longer long run to me. For me, the marathon was a race. It wasn't a long run. So yes, you can run a lot of marathons if they're long runs and you're collecting badges. If you have a race goal like the sub-3 that both of you were chasing, and now only one of you continues to chase, then no, you can't run them every week. You can't run 7 marathons in 7 days or 40 marathons in 40 weeks or whatever it is.
So, go ahead, Alan.
I was going to change the subject. Are you finished talking about marathons?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm finished before we start. Those things are crazy.
I was going to switch to diet, which is a bit of a controversial subject.
Yes.
But it appears in one of your keys. So rather than do all the questioning, maybe I'll just say, talk to us about diet, because there are schools of thought saying, oh, you should just fuel for your run, and that's it. And then there's the old school about, are you light enough to get a fast result? And there's some danger around trying to become lighter. So I'm not going to touch that too much. I'm just going to throw it to you.
Like you say, it's a tough topic to talk about, and something I write about the fact that healthy weight loss. I mean, we talked about VO2 max earlier. VO2 max, measures the amount of oxygen per kilogram of body weight, and so you can raise your VO2 max just by losing weight. Now, it's a really tough topic because we don't want to encourage people to lose weight who don't need to lose weight. There are too many eating disorders in our sport. And the worst, I'm 61. I've been running my whole life, and running for me is about health and fitness. The racing, and in case I give the wrong impression talking about records and this and that, those are shiny objects. Those are little things you chase, and as soon as you get one or don't get one, it's behind you and you pick the next shiny object, whatever your goal is. The underlying goal is to stay fit, to stay healthy, to have that wonderful experience that, where you get to go out every day and enjoy a nomadic, that nomadic instinct of moving over the earth while you commune with nature and whatever spiritual interaction you have with the world. It's this wonderful thing. So when we talk about weight, we're really talking about performance, okay? And we're talking about how light do you need to be to perform better. Healthy weight loss will help you to perform better. It's got to be healthy weight loss, okay? You need muscle to generate speed. You need healthy levels of fat for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, I think I mentioned in this book that women who don't have at least 30% fat in their diet, if their diet isn't at least 30% fat, they have a 250% increased risk of injury. All runners run better with increased fat in their diet. You want healthy fats, healthy carbohydrates. The first rule of fueling is eat enough, okay? It's not lose weight. The first rule of fueling is eat enough. Eat enough carbohydrates, okay? Eat enough fats, eat enough proteins. You've got to eat the carbohydrates and the fats first for the energy. If you go, oh, well, I'm going to skip on the fats and the carbs, I'm going to eat a lot of protein. Well, that protein is going to be needed for energy, because the first thing you do is you take the food you eat and you use it for the energy you expend. So you've got to eat the carbs, the fats, then you have to eat healthy proteins on top of that, because that's how you're going to repair muscle. Okay, that's how you're going to generate hormones, all the things you need. So the first rule of fueling is eat enough. Okay, as far as weight, yes, if you're eating enough and if you are at a weight that you consider a little bit over your healthy weight, you can lose a little weight and you'll gain a lot of time. Okay, but do not get unhealthy to gain time. You won't gain the time. You'll end up under fueled. You'll feel like you're running in army boots, over thick mud, because you won't have the strength to propel yourself. Your body will break down because it won't use the protein for what protein is supposed to be used for. You have to get enough calories to fuel what you're expending. Beyond that, it's a little tricky to talk about.
Okay. You actually mentioned that your metabolism can decrease by 20% if you're dieting.
It does.
Okay. And is that why, like, then the training gets harder and you feel like you're running through mud?
No, yeah, if you're eating well and you're training well, your metabolism will actually get a little bit higher, because it'll stay on a post run burn. So you'll not only burn the calories while you're working out. In my first book, Build Your Running Body, I break down exactly how many carbs and fats you burn based on the speed you're running. It changes depending on where you're jogging or running. But you'll actually increase your metabolism and it'll stay high a little bit afterwards. Usually you feel that that real drag if you don't have enough fuel. If you don't have enough fuel, you're going to feel that sluggishness. Something I suggest is within the first 30 minutes after you've worked out, get a carbohydrate injection. Your body will replace the carbohydrate within your muscle cells at between 200 to 400% the rate. If you can get those carbs right into your system after your run, it will go right in and restock those gas tanks for each muscle cell. And here's the deal about that. Remember, I said the first thing your body does is check your muscle glycogen tanks within those cells.
Mm-hmm.
If you eat right after you run and you fill those muscle glycogen tanks, the next day your brain checks and it goes, hey, you're ready to go. And it allows you to run faster. You feel better. You feel like you have pop in your feet. So that's the one thing I will say about dieting. Get those carbs in right away after you eat, and then make sure you get enough fuel in. Dieting can wait. Fuel first, train first, diet later.
Okay, that's yeah, I definitely like the that feeling when your legs just feel like they have that extra bounce in them.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
You know what else will give them that bounce?
What?
Guess. Drills.
So actually, I thought you were going to mention the next topic I was going to ask you about, which is shoes.
Oh, this is actually an interesting topic for this book.
Yeah, because
the super shoes were out when I was writing this book.
Okay.
I actually had a pair of super shoes when I was doing the draft of this book that Velo Press published. And I took those super shoes out and I went to a local park and I jogged a couple miles in my normal shoes and I put the super shoes on and I was warming up for a workout. And I jogged in my normal shoes and I ran about 7:20 pace for the warm up. I put the super shoes on and instantly dropped to about 6:20 pace without increasing my workload at all. Now, then I ran some 800 reps, and the 800 reps weren't that different between my regular shoes and the super shoes, but I was gaining about 1.5 to 2 seconds per rep with the super shoes. I took the super shoes off after that workout, and I thought, there is no way on earth these are going to be legal by the time this book comes out. These are cheater shoes. These vapor flies are cheater flies. I can't put them in the book because the book will come out. I'll tell everybody that cheater flies are the fastest shoe you can possibly get, and they won't even be on the market because there is no way they're going to allow these things to stay. And by the time the book came out, they had been allowed to stay, and that's why they aren't in the book.
Okay. I was gonna ask you about that. In the book, you mentioned that the best 5K shoes are light ones because your biomechanics change with the heavier shoes. But apparently barefoot running is less efficient than having shoes.
Yes, and that's been run in study after study. You become far less efficient because the problem with barefoot running, the idea with barefoot running, and in my first book, I address it in a couple sidebars. But the idea with barefoot running is you transition from a heel strike to a forefoot, to a more middle of the foot forefoot strike, and you become a more efficient runner. But the reality is that almost nobody actually makes that transition. Almost all heel strikers stay heel strikers. Okay, it's a very inefficient way to run, and it creates so much impact force when the heel comes down that the inefficiency becomes even higher and injuries become really high. I don't know if you remember the first study they did on the Vibrams. When the Vibrams came out, they did a study to see how long it would take to transition. That isn't technically barefoot running, but it was pretty close to barefoot running. Yeah, the idea was it would then protect you from glass or other objects on the road because you had that little. Well, the study was supposed to be 6 weeks of gradual transition, and they had to call it off after a couple weeks because I can't remember if it was 10 or 20, but 40 to 50% of the runners already had bone issues, bone injury issues, and there were 2 stress fractures already. People couldn't transition, and they were transitioning the way that they were supposed to, and they called the study off. They were like, people are getting too injured. So barefoot running isn't as efficient as the shoe. It's probably because you allow yourself a greater impact force. And remember that impact force turns into, the faster you can generate that force, the quicker you can get off the ground. So by using some shoe, you allow yourself a heavier impact force, and you're able to get off the ground more quickly.
And now with all that energy return foam in those super shoes, then you can get even more of it back.
It's pretty insane. I actually, now that they're legal and I'm in my 60s and I'm going to be going for the age 60 records for 5K and 5,000 pretty soon. And I knew I just have to learn to run in the super shoes, because whoever's going to take my record, going to try to take my record afterwards, is going to be running in super shoes.
Yep.
Yep.
And super shoes have been shown that, now they've run enough studies, they show that they can add up to a 7 to 8% advantage.
Wow.
Which is huge. The reason I'm still against the super shoes is because not all people respond to super shoes. There are responders and non-responders, and non-responders get nothing out of super shoes. The
that's so
average
sad.
response is 3 to 4%, but that's because some people get an enormous response out of it. So I'm trying to learn to run in them, though I have to tell you, I get in them and I feel like, we talked about that pogo stick earlier. I feel like I'm on a pogo stick.
Yeah.
I go about 2 miles of tempo in them, and my glutes and my hamstrings start hurting, and I'm going to have to learn to run a little differently to really fully utilize them. But there's no question that they are a tremendous advantage.
Okay.
Almost as, frankly, almost exactly as much as performance enhancing drugs. You get almost the people who use them get almost the same advantage as performance enhancing drugs. Put them together and there's no telling what you could do. You could maybe even run a sub 2-hour marathon.
Well, we're advocates of super shoes, although one of us is not a fan at all of Nike.
I mean,
probably both of us are not fans of Nike, actually.
Just so happens that I have Nike shoes because they just work. They make me feel fast. What can I say?
Nike makes very fast shoes.
And certainly we don't advocate performance enhancing drugs.
No,
but
that is the bane of the sport.
But caffeine is legal, and it's been proven to work.
Yeah, caffeine's good. Not just for running.
Exactly.
But,
I agree with that.
Yeah, but I have to tell you, and as a high school coach, I've coached open runners, masters runners, all levels. And I got so tired of the performance enhancing drug presence in sport that I was just done with it. And it was so fun to get back on a high school level, where I know there's a lot of performance enhancing drug use even on the high school level, but there certainly wasn't. And with my kids, or the kids we were competing against, and it was nice just to be back to that idea of pure sport and training and drugs. I've watched, and I know Alan, and you probably watched it. What it's done to our sport is just criminal, and there's a reason. I think that the popularity of the sport has died, and I think it has a lot to do with performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah, well, I know that recently they've, every few weeks it seems like they've found somebody that won one of the marathon majors that finally they were using performance enhancing drugs. And I think for us it's it's Kara Goucher. She talks very openly about like her own experience. She was upgraded to a silver medal from a bronze from her 10,000, and she has she's co-host on a podcast called the Clean Sport Collective, and she actually refers to it as the person that takes those performance enhancing drugs, they're stealing the moment for the for the other person. Like even when they get caught, that moment is lost.
Absolutely.
Especially for the fourth place. You know, the fourth place person that
Doesn't
gets
get the
upgraded
podium.
never got the podium. Yeah, it's a loss forever.
No, it's the first American busted for EPO, erythropoietin, which is a red blood cell booster. Red blood cells carry oxygen to the muscle cells, and EPO also has a nervous system effect. So EPO was the drug of choice for distance runners. The first American ever busted for EPO was a masters runner, a guy named Eddie Hellebuck. And Eddie Hellebuck ruled the masters scene for a couple of years when I first came in, back when I was in my early 40s. He earned over $100,000 a year in prizes. He set a slew of masters records, won a lot of national championships, and was finally only busted because he became he actually got well enough known that he rang the bell on Wall Street to open up the stock market one morning. But he only got busted because he got so brazen in his EPO use that he, at age 42, ran a 212 or 213 marathon and qualified to train at the Olympic Center with top marathoners training for the Olympic trials. He used EPO at the Olympic Training Center. And got tested and got busted. I found out about it because Eddie was the two-time champion of the Masters division of the Carlsbad 5000. And I was 42 and I was running, and Eddie didn't show up, and I won. And the Carlsbad 5000 at that time, it was like the race for masters runners, you know, the 5K masters. Everyone from around the country came. All the other top runners were there. I won the race. I crossed that finish line. You know, it wasn't about getting the check for winning. It was about hitting that finish line and the people cheering on the final stretch going into the finish. It was a great moment for me. And I emailed him afterwards and I said, thanks, Eddie, for not showing up. And I said, I got to win the race. And he emailed back and said he had an ankle injury. And it turned out he'd gotten busted the week before for EPO use. I got my moment because Eddie got busted. Otherwise, I never would have had that finish line. And one of my teammates at the time, David Olds, had gotten beaten by Eddie for the National Cross Country Championship a year earlier. And about 10 years later, I petitioned USATF, and USATF at the National Cross Country Championships, my friend didn't know, had made up a medal for him and called him up onto the stage in front of everybody at the awards ceremony and gave him the medal for being the champion at that race. And I thought, thank gosh, because he didn't get to be on that podium as the champion. But even then, it still wasn't being on the podium the day he won it.
Mm-hmm.
They steal, it's not money they steal, though they steal that, it's moments.
And do masters runners, just because you have a lot of experience with that, do they get tested like the regular pros? I mean,
like
because they're winning
competition?
Because they're winning money. I mean,
there's no out of competition. Technically, there's out of competition testing, but there isn't, and it leaves a bad taste because it's easy to tell who, you know, it's not easy, and I would never, just so we're clear, I would never name a name of somebody who was suspected of PED use if they hadn't tested positive. That's completely unfair. But that said, everybody knew Eddie was using performance-enhancing drugs. Everybody knew Kevin Castile was using performance-enhancing drugs when he got busted a couple of years ago as a masters runner. You know who's using performance-enhancing drugs because you know what is, you know, what I always say is if a runner, you know, if I have a record and I have some, if someone beats my record by 10 or 15 seconds, that's a big jump, okay? That happens. You know, there are people who are a little bit better. If somebody beats my record and comes back and beats another record a few days later and comes back and beats another record a week after that and then another record a week after that, they're recovering 200 to 300% faster than I am, okay? If you beat my record by 5%, that's a big jump, but it's humanly possible. If you recover 200 to 300% faster than the other best people in your division, That's not humanly possible. Okay. So I always say, look at the recovery, not the race times.
Yeah, unfortunately, we see people who come from nowhere and produce these out of the box results, and the tendency
Yeah.
is to be suspicious of that result. So
Yeah.
not only are people getting robbed, but also people who are maybe performing correctly are getting a cloud of
Oh,
suspicion around them because they've come from nowhere.
absolutely. And I mean, I personally, I don't know if you're familiar with the website Let's Run, but it's one of the most popular running websites there is, and the message board runs, it's also a big meeting place for runners. I can't tell you the amount of times I've been accused of PED using because I ran a fast race, and every time I set a record, I know, you can just count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's the message thread saying Pete
Yeah.
Magill is a PED user. How else could you set a record? So perhaps some of my animosity towards actual PED users is that I never get to celebrate. As soon as I
Yeah.
run well, what I hear is you must be a PED user. I won the National Masters Cross Country Championship when I was 49. The next oldest person ever to win was 46, and that was me. Okay. So the next oldest person to win was 45. So I won it significantly older, and I can't tell you the PED threads that pop up after that. One of the
Yeah.
luckiest things that ever happened to me is I finally fell off that master's cliff and my performances started going downhill. So everyone went, okay, maybe he's not a PED user.
Yeah, I heard about, like, I've heard of Let's Run. I've never been on the website, but I heard it's also like that message board is apparently a pretty toxic place. So
It's
you got to
become
have good
pretty toxic.
self-confidence to go
Yeah.
and read what's written on there, especially about you.
Yeah, it was always toxic, but every message board is. I also think it had a lot to do with revitalizing high school running. And I know I like the brothers who run it. I think they've done a great job. And I think it gave a forum for young runners to come on and exchange ideas and to actually, create excitement about young runners. And so in the United States, at least, I think it's had a huge impact on why we have so many good young runners. With everything good, you're always going to get something bad. With every young runner whose virtues get extolled on the Let's Run message board, there are going to be trolls who are tearing them down every chance they can get. And you got to kind of get to water off a duck's back to deal with something like that. I don't do a lot of posting anymore.
Let's
Okay.
let's try and wind things up a bit because time's getting on. Maybe you, as a sort of closer, I could come to your guidelines for masters athletes, because most of us in our club are technically masters. Is there one piece of advice that you would offer us, or is there something specific that traps that masters fall into?
I'm gonna give you my standard line here because it leads to everything else. And something I've said for years and has only been proven more correct as the years have gone by. Masters training is a no mistake zone. Okay. When you're young, you can make mistakes, maybe you train wrong and you have to like take a week off to get back, or you're sore for a couple of days. If you make a mistake as a masters runner, you always pay for it. It's a no mistake zone. You can't go out and run too hard one day. You can't run a killer workout one day. You're going to end up with a pulled hamstring or Achilles tendonitis, or there will be some negative effect. So it becomes absolutely important that you train correctly. Okay, so you have to make it a no mistake zone. Training correctly means doing all of the types of training you need to do to be the best runner you can be, but only doing what you need to do of each to get the adaptation you need. So only do the stimulus you need to get the adaptation you need. If you need to do it, if you are doing distance runs each week and you get to the end of the week and you wanted to hit a 50-mile week and you're at mile 47, but you did the workouts that you had planned, you did the distance run, don't add 3 miles in. You don't need 3 miles to get where you're going. That's a junk mile, okay? Only do the work you need. If you're doing a session of repetitions, or let's say you're doing tempo, because most of us do tempo at this stage. If you're doing tempo, you know, I can't tell you how many of my friends still in their 50s and early 60s go out and do a 40-minute tempo run, okay? Well, it depends what pace you're doing your tempo run. But if you do 20 minutes of tempo, you're going to get pretty much 100% of the benefit. And tempo pace would be the pace you could run for 60 minutes all out, okay? So a real tempo pace. If you're doing a half marathon pace, maybe 25 minutes. Okay, you're getting 100% of the benefit at 20 to 25 minutes. Let's say you're only getting 95% of the benefit at 100 or at 20 to 25 minutes. That's still most of the benefit. Get that benefit, move on. My friend Nolan Shahid, who's one of the greatest masters runners of all time, ran a 425 mile when he was 50, 452 or 453 mile when he was 60, holds all sorts of records. Great guy too. He told me once, he said, the secret to being a successful masters runner is always skipping the last repetition. And so if you have 8 reps, do 7. If you have 12 reps, do 11. He didn't mean literally start out and go, oh, I got a 12 rep day, I'm going to do 11 reps. What he meant is run, and when you have the workout you need, call it quits. Okay? Now, he isn't the first person to say something like this. When I was 25 and in Australia, I read a book by Arthur Lydiard. And Arthur Lydiard was describing a workout where he took his runners out into a park, pointed to a tree, and said, okay, run pretty hard to the tree and then jog back. And they ran pretty hard to the tree and they jogged back. And said, okay, do it again. And one of the runners asked him, how many times are we going to do this? And he said, until I think you've gotten the work you need. And I read it, and it was a very simple story. You know, he didn't write in the book how far it was to the tree. He didn't write in the book exactly how fast they were running to the tree. But I learned something that day. I learned it's about getting the correct work. It's not about setting an arbitrary pace and a set of repetitions. And that's what Nolan was saying. Nolan was saying, get the workout and quit before you injure yourself, because it's always the last repetition where you injure yourself, especially as a masters runner. The secret to running is doing the correct volume of everything you need to do, the correct volume of drills, the correct volume of short reps, the correct volume of hill running, the correct volume of tempo running, the correct volume of VO2 max, and the correct volume of distance. Every single one of those workouts targets a different set of muscle fibers, a different set of neurons, different energy systems. Do the right amount to get the adaptation you need. And Fast 5K, what I tried to do is break down each one of those types of workouts, tell you, this is how you work that. This is, you know, the different sections, VO2 max, hill reps, whatever, they have progressions to show you, this is how much you do of each. This is how much you rest between each. This will get you that correct volume you need to do to get the adaptation you want. And that's the secret. It's the secret for masters runners. It's a secret for younger runners, but younger runners are going to do what younger runners are going to do. Just like every generation and every aspect of living, we all have to make our own mistakes and learn from them. As masters runners, isn't it time we actually get around to the learning from our mistakes thing? No mistake zone, correct volume.
That's a good way to finish the episode. So, is there a place you'd like to direct listeners to get a copy of the book if they're interested in reading it, or is Amazon fine?
Amazon carries all 4 of my books. You can go directly to Velo Press to get the last 2 books, Fast 5K and Speed Runner. But I mean, Amazon is always easy. Most of them are still in your local bookstore. You'll probably find, you might not find Born Again Runner. It had the most disappointing sales of any of the books, which is too bad because I really should have called it The Beginning Runner. People mistook what the book was about. But that's still available on Amazon. But Build Your Running Body and Fast 5K should still be in your local Barnes and Noble or independent bookstore.
And if people want to follow you and find out what you're up to now, where can they follow you?
Yeah, I've shut down my websites. I have to admit, I reached a point about a little over a year ago, where I hadn't raced myself for 5 years. Since I was 55, and I said, I wrote books, I wrote my articles, I spent time coaching because I wanted to give back to this sport. It's not for this podcast. I've done podcasts talking about the life I was leading before I got back into running at age 39. Running saved my life. And I felt I owed something back to the sport. And I wrote the books and, wrote the articles and coached. But at a certain point, I'm like, I want to run again. I want to get fit. I want to get out there with my club mates again. I miss them. And I shut down my websites. And that's why you don't find me writing a column for, was Podium Runner. Now it's moved to Outside. You can find my columns at Outside and Runner's World, archived there. But I want to focus on getting back into shape myself, going on that nomadic journey every day, communing with nature, and getting back into the zen of running for personal reasons and club reasons again.
That's actually a really great 2023 goal. I think I agree with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
So you're gonna have to read the books. It's the only way. That's the only way you're gonna get to commune with me about running anymore. Or go to Runner's World and Outside and put in Pete Magill, and you'll pull up archives of lots of articles and columns from the past.
And for the nerds out there, like Build Your Running Body is a good book. Like I thoroughly enjoyed that. Like it's got pictures of everything. It's got, all the sciencey breakdown of what our running body needs.
Build Your Running Body was my attempt to bring running into the 21st century. I got so tired of running books where all the photos were of middle-aged men in short shorts doing a calf stretch against a backstop in knee-high weeds on some field. And running was this general thing. I thought running needs a book like weightlifting has books, like other sports have books. They need a photo guide. There are 400 photos in that, where I wanted to show every exercise. I wanted, fit young models. Every model in Build Your Running Body, there are about 11. They're national record holders, 4-minute milers. They're all top athletes. Nike provided the outfit. I know Nike didn't fare well earlier in this conversation, but Nike sponsored the photo shoot for that book, which I thought was fantastic. And I wanted to bring it in science, and I wanted to break down the running body into, cardiovascular system, muscles, connective tissue, nervous system, hormones, break it down in a way that other training and fitness guides break down the body. And so I was very proud of that book. It almost killed me to write it. 5,000 hours, man, was that a tough one. 2,000 studies, I think I read for that book.
Wow. But
in the long run, it was worth it. All that said, I think Fast 5K, if you're just looking to get faster, I think Fast 5K might be a more appropriate book, just to find out about the workouts and get some quick guidance on how to set up a training schedule.
With that, what we'll do is we'll give our summaries maybe for the book, Liz. Fast 5K by Pete Magill. I guess it's a no-nonsense book with clear practical advice. The layout and short chapters makes, I think, the understanding and the targeting of your improvement and what you're looking for easy to see and easy to get. or easy to search for if you're looking for something specific. The training programs at the end, we haven't really talked about those much, but they actually offer something for everyone at all levels. They're done in a way where they try to explain what you have to do and why you have to do it, and enable you to customize it according to what you need. So there's something there for every individual. I think you can design your full attack on the 5K distance if you want, comprehensively, or you can just pick some tips up to improve a bit while you're doing some other things. So, if you go, I'm not really a 5K runner, this could still be a useful book for you, I would say. And if you are a 5K runner, it's an absolute Bible in a sort of mini format. And what I would add at the end is just talking with you, Pete, about the book and about running in general, is once again the reinforcement to me as a 64-year-old runner still trying to improve in some ways is there's more that you can get. There's something else that you can do. There's something you can do better, or you can do more of, or you can do less of, or you can do differently, that's going to give you a little bit more edge. And isn't it great to be able to see that in running, and also to hear and feel your enthusiasm and love for the sport, which, shows through your book, and certainly I hope shows through this podcast.
I guess there isn't too much for me to add, but I'll add a few things. I found this book to be a quick read, and I loved the charts and the tables throughout. Of course, I always love charts and tables. Like, I don't know, it's kind of my thing. I also liked the general layout. The headings were like in bold orange letters, and in terms of just the look of the book, it's hard to tell online, but it's kind of a relatively small-ish kind of thin book, and so you can get through it quite easily. Since the chapters were short, it made it easy to just finish one, and then I could set the book down and, let's say, come back to the next one. And you don't really, like, it's not like some books where you need the flow of the book to pick it up again. You kind of don't need that, because each chapter is like a topic. I particularly like key number 15, which was the list of drills and descriptions. I think anyone would be able to begin to incorporate drills into their routine by reading the instructions. They were clear, and there are 9 drills in total, so it gives a really good variety, and most of the common drills that I've done in my running life.
So once again, thanks for your time, Pete, and thanks enormously for your book and your previous 3 books, if people want to go and avail themselves of those.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun to talk about this sport that we all love.
That we do. Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Big thank you to Outside Books for providing a review copy of the book. Big thanks to Pete for spending time with us today. And if you would like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast, or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, please leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out when new episodes are released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast streaming platform. If you have been listening for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word. Tell your friends about us, or share a link to your favorite episode with a running partner. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if this is how you listen to your podcast, or you can also rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. We are now also on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy us a coffee, or just go and see the other random things that we have posted, mostly running related. Bye for now.
Bye.